I'm Damion Lupo, and I am a financial architect. Today on Dov Barron's leadership program, we're going to go into potential and all of the misconceptions and all the crazy things that we think about and how we tap into real potential and how we get rid of bogus potential. It's an amazing program. You guys are going to love it, and just enjoy the heck out of it. Stay tuned. It's coming right up.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. My name is Dov Barron, and I'm here to connect you to your deep greatness. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take an insider look at what Snapchat, Quest Nutrition, and other instant billion-dollar companies, what is it that makes them into unicorns? If you're a new listener, new viewer of the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular listener, thank you for joining us, for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We really appreciate that. And thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you are a CEO, a C-suite leader, a sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity whatsoever, you know that in business there are highs and lows. And very often we see companies, particularly today, that go up like a rocket and find themselves in the death spiral that ends in a crash landing. But how do you become the phoenix that will rise even higher from the ashes of despair? Well, stay tuned, because our guest today has experienced those incredible highs and devastating lows. He's made and lost tens of millions. He's owned private jets and lived in his car, worked in prestigious jobs on Wall Street, and done dirty, back-breaking menial jobs like cleaning up at a meat market. Lovely. Can't wait. Damion Lupo is the personification of the serial entrepreneur. Over the last quarter century, Damion has started and owned more than 30 different companies, including an insurance agency, precious metal firm, a venture capital company, financial consulting firm, and more than a dozen real estate investment and development companies. He's also the founder of Yokido, his own martial arts, and he holds 3 other black belts. Damion is a 5-time author and of multiple books. I've got 3 of them right here in my hand, so look out for them. We'll get into that in a bit. He's a sought-after financial consultant and accredited investors and development companies. He's also, as I said, the founder of Yokido. He is been brought in. He's an expert who quickly diagnoses the hidden financial cancers within an organization and the people running them, and rewires them both for success. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Damion Lupo.
Hey, Doug.
Crowd goes wild, my man. Good to
That was
have you
amazing.
here.
That was an amazing intro. I feel like I want to go meet this guy that I'm staring back at.
So we'll start at the beginning, as always. Who is Damion Lupo and what makes you tick? Start with something easy.
You know what makes me tick is complacency, or like kind of the typical, I think, what we see with a lot of corporate people that are just doing the norm, that are sitting there playing it safe. I think that makes me crazier than anything else. Mm-hmm. And when I started going down that path many years ago, it became quickly obvious that I was not meant to be on that norm, because I was annoying myself. And ultimately that just ended up creating a lot of stories, which we call disasters and successes and things. but it's really just seeing people that are not tapping into their potential. I think that's the worst insult you can give somebody is, you have so much potential and you're not living it. I mean, that's a disaster.
Well, that in and of itself is a whole show. We can go into the thing around potential, but let's sort of pull it back for a moment and say, this is a leadership show. How do you define leadership? What's your view on what it actually is?
I think ultimately leadership is saying the things that have to be said and doing the hard thing. It's anybody can throw a title on themselves, but it's the movement, it's the decisions that you may be the only one that feels good about, or you may feel bad about it, but and be attacked in every direction. It's ultimately making those calls. When we see people that are doing great things, or the successes I've had, it's going out into the darkness. It's going out into the place where you're not really having people say, that's awesome, that's amazing, good choice. They're saying, you're crazy, you're stupid, that's dumb, we're going to blow this thing up. And I think that that's what defines a leader, is the person that's willing to do the things, really standing on their own in many, many cases, until things start to make sense for everybody else.
So, vision and risk?
I think it's vision and risk, and it's easy to have vision, but then the execution behind the vision is the hard part. It's the scary part. It's the painful part, because as an entrepreneur in leadership, you're not going to be right all the time. In fact, you're going to be wrong more times than not, and you have to be willing to stand with that stuff. And that's the painful part. I think it's why most people don't end up going out into the darkness or really building anything, because they're afraid of being chastised.
But you've built a couple of things, and you've gotten your legs slapped. You've fallen down, done the death spiral, and come back up. What is it that brought you back?
I think that there's something that's internal. Either we have to, at some point when we get beat down, and it wasn't just slap in the leg or slap in the face. I mean, I was run over by a train, and then it backed up over me. And really, there comes a point where you have to decide, am I going to just lay on this track? And I mean, if I'm still breathing, there's more time. And there's more that I can do. And so I don't want to be sitting there going, wow, you know what, on my deathbed, he had potential. It comes back to that. So ultimately, I had to decide, am I going to go out there and do something different? And the difference in that process was asking, who am I going to show up as before I start doing the same thing? And that's the shift. If you really want to become a great leader, you have to constantly go deeper inside yourself and really reinvent the who versus just the thing you do. The tips and the tricks are not necessarily the thing that's going to shift you into a place where you're creating the next Snapchat or the next global impact. You've got to change you, and that's the hardest work that anybody will ever do.
Yeah, but this is the thing this is my work. It's the work that I do with companies and with leaders. And invariably, it's the last thing a leader wants to do is to look at themselves. I mean, they want to look at upgrading their skills and their strategies and their tactics. But upgrading their software and their wetware of who they actually are, that's a whole different bag of tricks, because most of us, all of us, we all have an ego, and at some level, most of us are attached to some part of ourselves that we're going, but that's how I got to here. I mean, I'm working with a president of a company recently who said, listen, and he's like, listen, you don't get to have this level of success that I've had and then throw it all away. And I'm like, I'm not suggesting you throw it all away. Well, I've got there with this personality. Well, you got to look at yourself if you're going to keep going into the future. And I think that this is part of the challenges that we want to look back to move forward. And that is a huge challenge to stop a leader doing that. Now, you've got to look back in order to learn. But looking back at success, I think, is a devastating mistake. Tell us what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's a perfect place to really dive into the whole idea of disrupting your past by thinking in terms of the 10x thinking. Because if you use your past to define your future, and you're going to say, well, I did it in the past, and your ego is tied to the past, the success, where you've gotten to, you're going to constantly look to your past to figure out what you can and can't do. And your future is going to have to it's going to be justified by the past. So if you start thinking in terms of 10x, you ask, okay, what can we do that's 10 times more disruptive or 10 times the bottom line or whatever? Really, truly, you're going to have to completely rewire yourself, because nothing in the past will work. You can't literally do something from the past and have it grow 10 times. It does 10% perhaps, but the 10 times really forces you to be future thinking, future forward, and it takes your past and goes, thanks for the lessons, thanks for the advice. And that's not how we're going to do it in the future. So it really disrupts you if you start thinking that way very, very quickly.
So I want to push back on at you around something here, around this 10x stuff, because this is shit that people throw out all the time, and it doesn't really mean anything, because I can say, okay, well, we made $1 million this year, so we're looking to make 10. We made 10 million. We're looking to make 100. Okay, I get that in the hardcore numbers, but at a level of actually grasping what it is to think at a level of 10x is, for most people, nothing more than a fantasy. And for many of those people, a fantasy they can't even get their head around. So when I say to, and the analogy I remember from when I was a poor kid is, what will you do when you win the lottery? That was the language, right?
Yep.
When we were all poor. And it was like, buy a fancy car and buy a fancy house. Well, if you've got X amount of dollars and you do that, you're going to be in debt within a year because you've got to pay property taxes and because you don't think, So how do you, because you go in and you look at these companies and you help them to see that, how do you get them to actually comprehend the full capacity of what it means to think 10x? Because as I said, it's a nice concept, but it's kind of nebulous.
Well, you hit on something that's really important for everybody to really pay attention to. This is a good place to take some notes. You have to start asking yourself, what are you going to do at that point? If you're truly asking the question about 10x, like you said, okay, what are you going to do in that lottery event? If you go from $1 million to 10 million, what are you going to do? And what does it look like? And if you can't figure that out, if that money doesn't matter, if you're not going to hire more people, if you're not going to have a different life, a bigger impact, if you're not going to do something tangible, you're never going to go there because there's not a compelling reason why you're going to do it. Absolutely. You're going to go back to what's normal and easy. So I totally agree with you. If you just say 10x, okay, great. Well, a big part of it is, why are you doing it? Because it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of pain, probably, and a lot of struggle. And the point of doing it is because it really forces you to justify why you're doing what you're doing now, and to start asking questions like, the people that are around me, my support system, are they at this level or another level? Do I need different people? And if you're not asking those questions, here's the reality. Somebody's going to disrupt your space that's thinking bigger in all likelihood, because we're in the age of everybody disrupting everybody. So either you do it to yourself or somebody's going to do it to you. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Now, you and I chatted a couple of months back, and one of the things we spoke about was that you've noticed that there's a process. You've walked people through this process to becoming a unicorn in their industry and what it is they're doing. Walk us through some of that process so that our listeners, our viewers, can get a grasp of that. Because, the reason these companies are called unicorns is because they are rare, if not mystical and mythical. They don't really seem to, and I think part of the challenge is that people, particularly in tech, go, yeah, we want to be the next Snapchat, we want to be the next whatever it is, and so they're looking to make that app. But there's way more to it than that, and you've got a process. So see if you can walk us through a little bit of that, if you would.
Well, and a lot of this is based on the different things that I've created that weren't unicorns, but they had the intention, and just going through that and then looking at other people's things. It's funny, I was watching Silicon Valley, the show, last night, and just watching, it's a little scary if you're in the business building world and then you watch that show. It's terrifying how accurate a lot of the stuff is.
Oh, is it really? Is that good?
It's actually frightening. It almost makes you don't want to do it because you're realizing that's what happened to me today when you're watching the show. So I'm watching that stuff, and one of the things that we really detach from in this whole unicorn creation land is the reality of actual sales, and it's such a core part of business. And yet we see these businesses like the Snapchats or whatever it is, Facebook, that they're worth billions of dollars, and they have no actual sales for years, or the Ubers and so one of the mistakes that I've made, and this is really important for people to not make it and just learn from mine, is I went in, raised on my last company, raised a bunch of money, and then went out and started building things and said, if I build it, they'll come. And instead of figuring out exactly what they wanted by asking the question in the middle of the sales process, so we don't have to have a 50-part process. You really have to start asking, is there a proof of concept? And then keep scaling it. It's kind of the basics, but if you want a unicorn, all a unicorn is something you've sold 1 billion times. And or 1 billion eyeballs. So how are you going to do it? And you've got to prove it. And you start with 1 eyeball and then 10, and you keep doing that over and over again. what we do is we get really excited about the sexiness of all of this instead of going back to the basics. And if we don't do that, we run out of money and then we go, dang, good idea, but there's no unicorn. There's a dead horse in the road.
And I get that. But the argument on the other side might be, well, you just brought up the example. Snapchat have never made any money. Twitter, I still don't think have made any money. There are a lot of those companies. Amazon officially has never made any money, and the richest man in the world owns Amazon. I'm thinking there's a tax thing there, but it's just me. So it's a very different world. I mean, I've been around a while. I've been doing business a long time. I've been doing what I do for 30 plus years. And as you said, the golden rule was, if nobody's going to buy it, don't start the business. And there are businesses that are raising these insane amounts of money. It feels a lot like, to me, 2000, about 17 years ago, when we had the dot-com boom, and all that money went in, and then we had the dot-com bomb, which followed it very quickly. I feel like that's kind of where it is with tech, is that people are just stuffing money into ideas without a sale.
That's exactly what's happening. It is 2000 all over again. They're a great example of a friend of mine in Austin that built a company called Build-A-Sign, and they ended up selling and exiting to Goldman and had, I think it was a $50 to $100 million exit for him, and it was signs. And there was actually product that was being sold, and he just did something. And what he did is he thought about selling it from the beginning. So he was building a team around him from the beginning. He wasn't saying, okay, I'm going to go sell something and then maybe I'll have the right team, the right financials. It was the end in mind when he started. And that's, so if we're looking at the tech bubble companies, and that's our model, we're literally setting ourselves up for failure unless we get hit by lightning. And the reality is we're more likely to be hit by lightning than we are becoming a billionaire, having a company that gets sold or taken as an IPO. So if that's our strategy, we're literally living in Willy Wonka, Wonderland. Right. So I'm with you. And I think we have to be we have to be practical and visionary at the same time. Sometimes these things hit. If you're going to spend your whole life just focused on those, you probably should be in the venture capital space where you're just throwing 25, 50, 100,000 at a whole bunch of different things. So if that's your space, maybe. But if it's everything you're doing for the one unicorn, if that's your entire plan, I would say you're a little crazy. That's not the best plan, just hoping for the lottery ticket. Unfortunately, that's most people's plan.
Of course. So walk us through some of this process.
Well, I mean, one of the very first things that I do when I walk into somebody's firm, or I'll start figuring out who's there, who's making decisions. And I mean, it's coming back to the basics. What are the numbers telling us? What are they actually doing? Is there a problem? I mean, it's a basic leadership thing. Are you solving a problem, or are you just going out there because you enjoy doing something? This whole idea of we're gonna have some type of passion and then it's going to convert into a big company is Looney Tunes to me. If you don't have the market responding that here's the problem. So we start asking, what's the problem? And we start asking, who's actually executing this thing? The vision is one thing, but the execution is where that's where it happens. So I started asking the questions: who's executing what here? Who's here that shouldn't be here? What do you have people that you love that are useless? And I think a lot of companies have that type of stuff, and it keeps them stuck where they have people that are just clinging on, the clinger-oners. So we eviscerate the clinger-oners, and we eviscerate things that don't make sense. We start redeploying. We deploy money into things that we've all heard this before, that drive the sales, that are marketing. A lot of times people go, well, I'm going to focus on building things instead of marketing and talking to people, the customer, the prospects. So we start figuring out where the resources are really being put. And I mean, I made this mistake where I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tech, and it was really interesting until the tech didn't work, and I hadn't spent the money on sales. So then I had this dead tech and no sales. I mean, those type of things are very, very common. But oftentimes we don't see it until somebody actually looks at it and says, what are you doing here? And so we ask that question every time we go in.
I mean, I think there's this lovely idea about a superior product. And I know it sounds disrespectful, but I think it's nothing more than a lovely idea of a superior product, because what I know this personally, I've experienced it, is that, I'll give you an example just to be totally transparent. My wife and I, as one of the businesses we had a seminar company for 20 plus years. And one of the things we offered was a couples training that was, without doubt, freaking spectacular. I mean, it was mind-blowing. What it transformed the relationships, it was amazing. But it went in the face of all conventional wisdom. There was another bloke who came out with a book about people about one gender coming from one planet and another gender coming from another planet. I'm sure you can't work out what the book title was. And it was, in my terms, crap. And I will tell you that I actually had that discussion with the author and said, you're perpetuating some really terrible beliefs here. This stuff I was doing was, and it's not to blow my own horn, but it was light years ahead of this stuff. That person is still trading on that today and doing very well, and I actually wish him all the best with that. But what's the difference? Mine was a superior product. The difference was marketing. He understood the problem we were solving, and he got the marketing out there. In fact, what most people don't know is he wrote a book about 3 years before that. It was the same book, but it had a different title. And the marketing team came in, ripped the book apart, inserted these planets, remarketed it, re-put it out there, and it went through the roof. So a superior product is not the answer. Yes, I think you should have a superior product. I actually do. I think we should all have superior products. But if you have a superior product, even in your own head, and you go, well, this is the best thing since sliced bread. But if you don't know how to get it out there, if you don't know how to get it to the world, then you're kind of dead in the water. And part of not getting it out there can be this stuff you're talking about, which is holding on to the fantasy of, well, I really like Fred. Fred's a nice guy. I don't want to let Fred go. So we're going to spend $50 a year on him when we could spend that 50 on advertising or marketing or hiring somebody who actually knows how to do this.
Well, yeah, there's a really good example of the last company that I started, where I had a partner that had a large percentage of the company. And the reality was that there was no real value for what this person was bringing to the table. And so when we were working with VCs in Silicon Valley, asking them about an additional raise and things, one of the questions that came back immediately was, what the heck is this person's role? What are they doing? And I couldn't justify it. And they didn't want to touch the company because they said, we can't put money into something and chase something where you have somebody that has 30% of a business and they're not creating any value. That's crazy. So we immediately exited our ability to actually raise money and go to that next level because of that initial structure. And this is one of the things people do. They make that mistake right up front. It's fine giving people big chunks if they're actually doing something of value. But to your point about the product, most people would say that they could make a better hamburger than McDonald's. Sure. But the truth is, do any of them have a better system than McDonald's? And the answer is no. Nobody has a better system in the entire world than McDonald's. And so what is it? Is it the product you're in love with, or is it your system and the people that are executing? And that's what you have to switch gears. But it's hard because our heart's in this thing. It's the thing that makes us get up in the morning. We're all excited about it. The question is, are you really just focused on your thing or the impact of your thing on more people? And if you start focusing on the impact, you start moving away from just the product. Because our friend that we're talking about with the book about the planets, he sold millions of books and Absolutely. Millions of people have seen that. Absolutely. Is it superior? No, yours is better. But you haven't had your stuff touch millions of people. So what's the delivery that you're going to do, right?
Yeah, it's wonderful. How many geniuses are still in their garage? So, and you brought it to the point. For me, it's absolutely, you have to have the marketing to get it out there. But, again, to the point. So you've got the superior product and you've got a spectacular marketing system and everybody wants to buy it. But as you just said, you have no system in place for the manufacture or the production or the process. Dead in the water again. And we've seen that. We've seen a superior product with a fantastic marketing system, and you're very excited because, oh my God, this is an amazing product. Everybody's going to love it, and they're getting us out there now, and we're on CNN and we're on here and there, and now we just got 20 million orders and we're dead in the water.
And that's funny that you're talking about that, because that's exactly what happens for a lot of these companies that end up on Shark Tank. They get the exposure, and within weeks or a month or two, their company's literally blown up because they had so much exposure and so much activity, and they didn't have the systems or the team or anything, which is why if you don't latch on to somebody that you can bring in that already has that thing built, your success may be your demise. The truth is it's very it's very likely that you're going to have an event that you can't even survive. That's actually a good event if you're not prepared for that event and asking. That's why this 10x thing is so interesting when you ask, what if we had 10 times more orders next week? What would we do? Maybe go out of business. I mean, that's the reality. So you kind of have to look into the future and ask those questions and set yourself up.
Yeah, I mean, I know that even for myself, that is what I've had that happen, where I've had something phenomenal happen, and it's actually caused me enormous amounts of pain and stress, and because I hadn't thought that. I mean, I hoped and wished for the big event, but when the big event came, I wasn't prepared for it. And I've gone the other way. I've had everything prepared, but not had all the other sides. So, you're so right in that we've got to have all the pieces. We've got to have all the pieces. It's interesting because I'm going to sort of take a little twist and a turn here, which you knew I was going to do. But I'm going to take a little twist and a turn here because I look at different things. I'm always fascinated by how businesses are run by different groups or individuals in ways that work, even if they're not legit. One of the best business systems is called the mafia, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting people should run by that system, but they know what their business is. They know the problem they solve. They know how to enforce that system. They know how to keep a monopoly. They know how to do all of those things. And you have some prior knowledge of this world that I would love for you to share a little bit about. If you wouldn't mind describing the mafia connection.
It's kind of a weird background because historically my family was heavily tied into the New York mob scene back in the early 20th century. And so one of the things that we did as a family, we moved to Alaska to be very, very far away from it. And I just remember hearing a lot of the programming that came from my father, who was around that stuff. And there was a lot of fear because in that space, in the mafia space, it's based on fear and respect. Yes. And you're on the edge of being killed if you make a mistake. Okay, it's kind of a daily thing. It's like being in a civil war in the middle of some city in the United States.
It's not like modern business where we say, well, fail forward. It's like fail and die.
Yeah, fail and die. I mean, that is real. When you fail in business, most times you're not going to die. I mean, but we think we're going to die. In the mafia, if you fail and you do the wrong thing, you may end up getting a bullet. So
wearing cement boots, cement boots.
Yeah, cement boots. I mean, this is what happens. And there are rules. It's if you look at the mafia, the way the mafia is run, there are rules. You violate the rules, there are consequences, and it's more extreme. So we can learn in kind of an accelerator. If we look at the mafia and the way the mafia works, they go in and they ask the question, how do we dominate a space? Now, I'm not condoning mafia tactics or things. You just have to look at the mindset when somebody goes in.
But I think you said something really important there, because I think you can learn from anything. And I think, I just had a very good friend of mine who actually has been on the show, who just served 6 months in Pentonville jail, Pentonville prison, which is the toughest prison in the UK, and doesn't have a criminal record. He was never convicted of anything. He doesn't have a criminal record. He can go anywhere he wants. He was put in there for contempt of court. That's besides the point. But the point is, he went in and he learned a ton of stuff by being inside that system. And I think that there are mafia rules and mafia understanding of business that we could all damn well learn from. I'm not so saying that you pop somebody in the back of the head if they fail. That's not. But understanding the harsh world of consequences, and particularly in today, and I talk a lot about culture and the understanding of culture. This idea of family, and that it's so ingrained that I think it's a very interesting thing that that your family history is out there. You've gone off and done business, and of course you have, as you said, you've failed many times and come up and you've been the phoenix, but without getting the concrete boots. What do you talked about it being based on fear. When you have done the things that you've done, you've had the successes and the failures that you've done, how did you keep going? Because I know, I've been through it. When we have a devastating loss, millions of dollars, your airplane, whatever it might be, and you end up living in your car, you're living in Shitsville, how do you come back? How do you come back and override the fear? Because the fear is, oh shit, I'm already in the toilet. What's next?
I think this is what most people run into right in the very beginning. It's why they don't actually take a step forward. They just and really what we're afraid of is being eaten by a tiger. I mean, this is like primal it's primal programming that's in us. Where if we make a mistake, it used to be that something would jump out of the bushes and it would eat us.
Sure.
So here's how you get past the big. When I lost $20 million worth of properties, my whole portfolio was destroyed. When that happened, the reason that I was able to get up and keep going is because I had failed at so many things beforehand. I knew that I wasn't going. It wasn't my life. I kind of thought it was at the time a little bit. But here's the trick: if you practice falling on your face and you keep getting up, you realize, okay, this is just part of how it is. Mm-hmm. If you are so focused on being perfect and never making a bad decision, which is what we see in the military, we see people that don't want to make a decision that messes them up, so they always get advanced. We see it in corporate situations all the time where people go, I can't make a mistake because then I'm off the leadership track. And people that pop out oftentimes, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, are those that haven't really screwed something up really, really bad. And I think that people are making a mistake, and we're going back to the potential. You're not really giving yourself a chance to learn. And when you learn, you start to build this muscle so that when you do get whacked really hard, you can adapt and you can flourish. If you're not used to that process of learning as you make mistakes, then the one time you get hit really hard, you're frozen, you're stuck. I just had the experience of making so many mistakes, losing so much money in the entire process leading up to those 10 years before the meltdown, that when that happened, it kicked me. I was down for a couple of years, and then I got back up. But it was because of all the previous stuff, and that's the key. It's the secret hack that takes years, and people don't want to do it. They want the shortcut.
Of course. What is your best? Well, give us your own. What's your best personal Phoenix story where you just got burned up and managed to come back?
Well, when in 2008, when I had 7 projects around the country, and each one of those was supposed to net to me personally over $1 million. My net worth was $5 million at the time, and it was great. Everything was good. Had the Ferraris and the jets and everything. And 12 months later, all of those projects simultaneously were upside down, in foreclosure, gone. And I went, wow, I didn't realize how wrong I could be. And that was one of the huge lessons. But at the time, I was just pretending that everything was fine. And the problem
Isn't it funny that we do that? I did that too. It's like, no, it's all good. All right, can't let that ego get any tarnish on it whatsoever. No, it's all good. I stopped the plane because I'm trying to be more concerned with the environment.
You stick yourself in that place, and you can never actually go on if you deny it, if you're not being true, if you're not being honest about what it is. And that's for a while I remember floating around with my American Express black card and acting as if everything was fine. And then eventually they turn off the card, and eventually you run out of the last bits of money, and then the mask comes off. And it was really going down into that space where I had to start asking a different question. I had to ask what was true. What was I running my life based on? And in terms of leadership, we really have to ask ourselves, how am I making decisions? What is it based on? I might have a Wharton MBA, but what is my value MBA? What's driving the decisions? And I was driving my decisions based on more all the time. And I had to ask, okay, is it more money or more impact, or what the hell am I doing? And once I got that, I knew how to make every decision going forward.
So what was it before? What was it? It was more what?
It was more cash. It was never enough. It was $1 million, and then it was multi-millions, and then it was $5 million, and then I'm looking at bigger things. It was always about more cash, and it wasn't really about what am I going to do. The initial question at the beginning about growing a company, why did I want more money? It was because it was for more money. It was this narcissistic focus on ever more without a real compelling reason or deeper, whether spiritual or emotional or impact. There was nothing beyond just more.
So when you get to that place, you have your fall. Mine was literal off a mountain. Yours is as you just described. What was the turning point for you? What was the flip that had you go, it's got to be about something else?
Well, in 2010, I went and worked on a political campaign, and I got fired from this thing. I was a volunteer, and I got fired. So that tells you how bad of an employee I am.
Isn't that a Seinfeld episode?
I'm proud
You're
of
fired,
me.
but I'm volunteering. You're fired.
Well, when that happened, I, of course, looked at the people that were saying, you're an idiot, you got fired. And I said, no, I quit. But the truth was I got fired. And it was at that moment where I realized something's got to give. I've got to really look at who I am. If I keep doing the same things, we can get kicked, fall down, get back up, and keep going. But if we don't look at what's really true, we're going to end up getting kicked and fall down. We're still the same person. And so that was the moment where I thought something has really got to change, and that's where the work begins. It's not just saying, okay, I'm going to get into a different industry. Well, the problem is I'm going to follow me into the other industry.
As the Buddhists say, wherever you go, there you are.
That's it. It's absolutely the case, and I couldn't get away from it. A new town, a new industry, a new job was not going to fix anything, and so that was where the big shift happened. And it's your initial question. Who are you, and what's your background? I'm a teacher. I love teaching. And it's not teaching academics. There's so many people that are basically, the fake news we talk about. They're fake teachers. They teach based on what they read instead of what they've done. I don't think that they have the depth to really give them respect and honor them if it's just from a book that they're regurgitating. So my thinking and my soul is really based on teaching from my experience. So I'm always out there doing it. And I think that that's what we need more of in terms of leaders, people that are actually out there doing things, and then they can lead by example and historicals, not just, hey, I read this really great article, or I have this really cool pedigree. My CV is excellent with all my schools. Who cares? That's easy. That's generic. But what have you done?
But again, for you, what was that turning point? Because you realize you're blowing smoke and you're telling everybody everything's fine. But at what point? What was there some event? Was there something that made you, aside from the turning off your credit card, was there something that made you go, oh shit, I got to do it differently?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think the universe gives us little nudges all the time. And one of my big nudges was I was actually at home, and I remember this event pretty vividly because it's incredibly emotional, where I was there and I had a knock at the door, and I had 4 federal agents, all with guns and badges, knocking on the door, and
they were looking for your relatives.
They were probably looking for my relatives. They were looking for my uncle or something. I'm not real sure, but I thought they were looking for me, and so I went and did what you should do. I hid in the closet for a couple hours, and then when I came out, I remember going to the door and looking to see if I was going to get tackled or what have you. And there was an envelope, and when I pulled the envelope down, it was from the IRS. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I've lost my money. Now I'm going to have a big audit or something. And it was actually to the lady that lived in the house before me. And it really brought me down to my knees, where I thought, okay, I'm running based on fear. Absolutely. And it's kind of a healthy mafia system. You're running on fear all the time, but it's really toxic. And it ended up putting me in the hospital because I was just dying inside, because there was no optimism or hope. There was just fear. Wow. So fear can be helpful, but it can also keep you completely paralyzed. And I was realizing how paralyzed I was in that moment.
I read that in 2014, your father passed away. How did that impact your thinking? How did that change the way you thought?
That may have been the most powerful moment in my entire life. A few weeks before he passed away, we were sitting in a coffee shop up in Alaska, and I knew that it was close, and I think he was in a little denial, but still realizing, okay, this probably ain't going to work. I'm probably going to die pretty soon. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. And that is when I found myself experiencing potential and regret. And I thought, God, this is never going to happen to me. I am never going to allow this, and I'm going to do everything I can to poke and punch and slap and drag as many people out of that potential of regret as I can, because it is the worst space you can imagine being in, seeing, or experiencing. That is what drives me. It's what gets me up. I'm not going to have my last breath going, God, there's so many things I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that is literally it's the experience of hell, being hell on earth, is really seeing in that last moment the person or the man that you could have been, or meeting them. And that's what happens when we see our life flashing before us with all the potential and all the things that we wanted to do. That is the biggest slap. It's the biggest universal train wreck on top of you. It's feeling that and seeing it. So that's what drives me now.
Is that is that what created a reinvented life, or was it something else?
That really, there was a wake up call, working so hard for so many years and then having it go away. And the reinvented life, that was a multi-year process of just getting to the truth. And then I thought, okay, I've got the truth. But then what I realized in the moment after I thought I had the truth was having somebody say there's so many things that I wanted to do, so much that my dad had to give still, that just he didn't go out. He didn't want to go into the space of the darkness or the what if. And that was the next level of reinventing. It was saying, never in my life will I live that way. And if I see somebody doing it, God help them, because I'm going to shake them loose.
So tell us about. I mentioned it in the introduction. Tell us about the creation of Yokido, because it seems quite sort of maybe even diametrically opposed from this focus on business and growth and finances and and even consulting in that framework, and then you've created this martial art.
Yeah, the wild thing about that, it's kind of strange because it would seem that they're very different and they're literally the same. And so when I look at training or teaching, it's become me. It's become an expression of who I am. And so the way that I show up with my students is the same way I'm in business. And Yokido is based on power. It's not based on force. It's a great book by that name, Power versus Force. Highly recommend, one of my favorite books ever. It's all about, to me, power comes from presence. It comes from connection. So the pillars of Yokido are power and relationship and enlightenment. And so this power is not about punching somebody. It's about being in relationship with them. It's about the connection. It's about removing the tension. And if you think about business, if it's all about tension and force, it's not going to last because something is going to break. If it's about power and connection, then you start to create, and the relationship expands, and it's kind of like nature blossoming. And so it's hard for people to say, well, I'm going to allow, because they're used to forcing things. We're used to jamming things all the time. So I practice this martial art in both in the dojo and in the real world, and I'm constantly looking at people's force. How much force are you putting on this one thing? And maybe you should just go off to the left or the right a little bit and let this thing go by, because you're fighting with something. Why? And it's usually because I always have, but there's no real good compelling reason, right. And there's no power there. It's just a lot of force and a lot of tension that's ultimately going to wreck whatever it is you're trying to create.
But don't you think that people struggle with allow because it seems to be passive? I mean, particularly if I'm talking about people, that I work with and you work with and even myself, who are quote unquote more A-type personalities. The idea of allowing seems like, you're asking me to be a wet dishcloth.
Well, here's a good way to look at this. We've often heard of the 80-20 rule or Pareto's principle. Mm-hmm. And if you think about working with, whether it's a customer, a client, another company, if you think about that, there are certain people and companies that are going to seem like, wow, you're in the flow. It's so easy. These are the people that make you all the money. They're the most fun. And typically those are the 20% that make 80% of the money, or the 5 that make the 95. And if you're fighting with the other 80 or 95% of the people to try to force them to get to do something, the chances are you're going to make a lot less money, you're going to have a lot less impact, and you're going to be stressed out. And so here's the process. You let go. You let go of all that nonsense. You focus on the people that are in that relationship, that circulation with you, and things start to happen. We tend to not have the trust that that's actually going to work, because we don't believe in the 80-20 principle. We go, good idea, makes sense, but then we won't let go and actually live in the 20%. When we do, we find, wow, there's a lot less tension, and there's a lot more flow.
But you see, I think that's the other side of potential, where I may or may not disagree with you, but it's certainly how I look at it. And I think that potential's full of shit. And the reason I say that, not to disparage what you're saying, but what I mean is that it's full of shit in that I can see your, as in whoever that is, potential, but it doesn't mean you are going to fulfill it. It doesn't mean you even want to fulfill it. And that's part of the challenge. And I think that on the other side of that, when people are looking at that 80% that you just talked about, so there's 20% who are making you the most of the money, but they look at the 80% with potential. They go, yeah, but I'm not going to let them go because I know potentially in there's some real golden people, there's some real diamonds who are going to put a ton of money in my bank account. So, this is where potential becomes a pain in the ass because it's projected onto other people. I mean, this, you work with clients, I do too. And I can see potential, but I can also, I think of somebody I've been working with recently who I see a ton of potential in, they're never going to go there. I actually had to say, we need to start working together because I can see. You say you want it, but you don't actually want to step into that potential. It's actually, I've said for years that potential is a wonderful thing because it's the buoyancy of cowards. It keeps you afloat in the idea of what you could be. It's the I could have been a contender, but you never actually step into the ring. Do you know what I mean?
That I totally agree with you. Here's maybe the missing piece with the potential and looking at those 80% and realizing they have potential. When you let go of those people, you open a space. You open a space for the people that are actually going to do something that also have potential. So if you're focusing on the people, because everybody has potential, but the question is, are they going to do anything with it? And you're right. Most people, unfortunately, aren't. So you have to be a good filter of those things, whether they're buying something or you're working with them, whatever it is. I think the hardest thing is that when we have people that we really love and they have potential and we struggle because we're not willing to cut them loose and they consume all our damn time. Right. And you have to be willing to say, okay, my time is limited. Where is it going to be spent where it's actually going to be used and somebody's going to do something with it? That's the key.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think it's the difficulty, and as human beings, particularly as decent human beings, we care about people. Right. When you care about somebody and you love them, you want to see their potential. I mean, that's how we all ended up in relationships that we shouldn't have been in for way longer than we should have been in them. Right. So that's why, because, you care and you see good things in that person, but it doesn't mean they're going to fulfill it. And it takes a lot of personal courage and self-knowledge to be able to say, I got to walk away from this. I mean, I remember an example, and because I think it's totally applicable. It's why I love teaching the relationship program that we did, because it's exactly the same in business. I remember dating a girl and for way too long, and when we broke up, I said to her, I really need to apologize to you. And she said, why? And I said, because I've kept you longer in this relationship because I can't be what you need. What you need is nothing wrong with that, but it's not who I am. And what I need is not in you, but I've lived in the potential of who you could become, and you've lived in the potential of who I become. And I think we do that with our employees, we do it with our teammates, we do it even with companies and ideas. The potential, I've had 1 million ideas that potentially could make $1 million. And I know you've had at least that many, and some of those have put me in the ditch.
Yeah, there is something about being willing to kill a relationship or kill a business, and it's the best choice. It's the most beneficial choice, and yet we hold on to all these things. One of a colleague of mine that used to work with Steve Jobs was telling me stories, and I latched onto this because I loved it. She would say we would often look at somebody and we would say, you know what, I'm going to help you be successful at your next venture.
Exactly.
And it was the biggest gift. And I've looked at some of the people that have worked for me and with me. And one of the things that's hard was when I really cared about them saying I'm going to help you be successful at the next thing. Instead of saying you're an idiot, they're going to be successful somewhere else. It's not here. And as long as they're there, it's creating toxic friction and tension. And it's the same with personal relationships. We have to be willing to, quite frankly, have some balls and make the decision.
Absolutely.
And you know what? It might sting a little bit, but it's another case of hell on earth with the person that's in the wrong place in the relationship or in the business, and nobody's willing to say the best place for you is somewhere else.
Somewhere else, yeah. I mean, it's the whole principle that Tony Hsieh built into Zappos. Is if you let us help you transition to somewhere else, because we actually want to see you be successful, and if you can't do it here, we want to help you to do it somewhere else. And that level of commitment to serve for me is outstanding, because it's actually serving beyond potential, as in you have to step into it. It's your responsibility, as opposed to, I can see great things in you. I spent 20 years doing that to people. I can see great things in you. I can make this happen for you. No, I can't. That's some messianic bullshit ego stuff that I was running the truth of the matter is, I can see this in you, and you can get there, but only if you want to. And if you want, I'll help you. But for every step I give you, you got to take 3. That's a whole different gig.
This is really hitting home for me right now with one of my my key people that's been with me the longest, and I have a small team, and I'm realizing that in the space we're in, he has gotten to a point where most of his time is spent doing things he already knows how to do. And one of the things that's really important for me when I bring somebody on is I want to make sure that they're growing. And it's a great rule. I forget who said this, but the idea is that when you start a job or a career, you should be spending most of your time learning. And when you get to the point where you're spending most of your time not learning, just doing stuff, it's probably time to move on because you're growing stagnant. Yeah. And with him, I feel like that's the case. And so we started that conversation, and it's painful because it's not necessarily, at least immediately, in my best interest to disrupt someone that has so much intellectual capital, that knows how to do everything. And yet I feel like I'm not serving him as the leader by saying, stay here and paying him more. For him, I need to do the right thing. Right. And that is to help him into his next thing so he can keep growing. It's not a good idea. And it's to me, it's being a poor leader, trapping people with the accoutrements and the things that will help the business, but literally are killing people one day at a time.
Well, I was going to say, I think that over time it ends up being damaging not only to them but to the business, because what you end up with is somebody who can do the work but who is disengaged. And we all know, we've all read the research on what that does to a company, right? It's terrible. So yeah, I can do the functionality, but that is a post-industrial age mentality. You know, you put the widgets on the conveyor belt. But once you've got expensive thinking, once you've got expensive business, you can't afford that anymore. It's got to be about people's growth. I think you're so right. And bringing it to that, you know, we've talked a lot about the ups and downs and all the rest of it. And I'm constantly saying to our listeners and to the people I work with, there is no there. You're always in the process. It's always growing, always developing. It should be. And so I like to ask my guests, so as to inspire those who are listening to take off the mask. What are you currently working on? What are you presently struggling with in your business that you're trying to upgrade into?
Well, one of the things that I've thought about when I do consulting work, and people pay a lot of money for the one-on-one time, and it's fairly simple to do it when you get to a space where you can do that kind of work. The thing that's really more important to me now, as I've shifted and reinvented, is figuring out how to have a larger impact with more people. And so it's taking all of these things that I do and putting them into a space, like taking the complex, which is really diving into somebody's financials and their life and their money and everything, and boiling it down into a space where anybody in the world could tap into that wisdom, that information, and go through that process for either very little money or free. Boiling it all down, it's a shift because it's a little terrifying when you're used to somebody paying you $25,000 or $50,000 to do the work, and then you say, I'm going to do all this work, I'm going to digitize it, I'm giving it away. And to me, that's why I'm here. It's not to be a highly paid consultant. It's to lift people up with all that I've gone through. And so that's where I'm spending all my time is building these tools for more people to be able to tap into their potential if they want it. Wow. And it's the hard work. And it's the most fulfilling work. And I think fulfilling is the thing that we're all looking for. It's not the success, it's the fulfillment of life. What are we doing? Why are we doing it?
Yeah. Tell us a leader you admire, a leader who's doing it differently.
You know, one of the guys that I love because he's constantly getting attacked right now is Elon. It's like whatever he does, they go after him for the Boring Company, drilling holes under LA, or his space project, or the Tesla, and whether it's the subsidies that they disagree with. If you watch this guy, he doesn't seem to care. He hardly even smiles. He just sits there and he says what he says, matter-of-factly. And I have a lot of respect for him because he is so focused. It doesn't matter what anybody's opinion is. He's going to do what he's going to do. And anybody that is in that mind space and they have that conviction, I have a lot of respect for. I don't have any respect for people that just go with the flow and everything's an opinion poll. To me, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, he's an amazing business leader. He's an incredible visionary. Probably, in the next 20, 30 years, we'll look back and I think that he and Steve Jobs will be two of the greatest innovators of our time without a shadow of a doubt. And I believe that Musk will be even on a bigger level. But you know, I've seen interviews with him, and he's a fascinating character because I think that that's a mask. I think he is actually deeply hurt by the people who criticize him, and I think that to me is even more powerful because I've seen him say how devastated he is by the people who he looked up at, who told him he's an idiot, who he's now proved are absolutely wrong, and how devastating that was with him. But what I love about him here is his tenacity and his relentless willingness to take that vision and turn it into a reality. I mean, and it's crazy shit. I mean, when you go, yeah, I'm going to fly to Mars, it's crazy shit, right? We're going to create solar that is paper thin. Yeah, whatever, right? Electric cars. Yeah, that's a fancy, man. We've tried that stuff. It doesn't work. And then he releases all the patents and lets everybody else do it. I mean, amazing. But they all shit on him nonetheless. And I think it's quite profound.
There is that I can. It's bizarre that I can relate to that, where you have because I focus on what I'm doing and I push through it, and there are people that attack it, and there are people that I thought were my friends, and then I watch them doing things that they don't even see me see, and I think, wow, and it does hurt. I mean, it's brutal when that happens. And I go, okay, this is probably one of the reasons that a lot of people at the top or that are breaking through things have very, very small inner circles with very, very trusted people, because you get hurt by people, and it is painful. So maybe you're right. I can see that. Maybe there's a mask and there's a lot of pain behind that. I've been through that stuff, and it sucks. Yeah. And it can feed you, but it's still painful, man. It's still a raw nerve.
Yeah, you can be fired up by the fuck you, I'll do it anyway. I get that. But at the same time, if you're human, you have feelings, and it hurts to have those people. I mean, we know in psychology, the law of psychology is that people will take their foot off the accelerator the closer they get to the finish line. Right, and the reason is because we all psychologically know, because we're all tribal beings, that I'm going to lose my tribe when I break through that line. That there are those people who will turn their back on me, not because I failed, but because I succeeded. Because now, they will project that I think I'm better than them, and they will distance me, and there's all that stuff. And you go, No, I was born in a ghetto in Northern England. I know how many guys I sat around with before I left at 21 years old, who I sat around with between 16 and 21, who said they were all going to leave, and they never did. And they all complained about the same things I did. The only difference was I was willing to let them go.
You're reminding me of a fairly personal thing. I've never actually shared this before. It just kind of sits there, and there's things probably that sit with most of us that we don't really talk about, but they fester. And for many years I've watched my family struggle with money and not having enough, and the limited resources and choices, and I've desperately wanted to help them. And I've done things, and it's oftentimes the helping just gets me a return slap in the face. And I remember not too long ago, actually earlier this year, where one of my sisters came back when I reached out to her, and the message, I hadn't talked to her in months. The message was, it's always about money with you, and it's sorry if I don't make $500 an hour. It was this knee-jerk reaction. And I thought, wow, I want desperately to see her free and to be able to go after the things that matter in her life. And instead of saying anything positive or asking for help or anything, it was that, sorry that I don't make this money, and it's always about money to you. And I thought, wow, I mean, sometimes you can't do anything. It's somebody else's choice. And that's painful to be in that space and really want it for somebody and have them reject it.
That's your hook into the potential, but that's what I said, they can't do it. And
that's right.
From a point of view of psychology, which is my background, people will protect their own prisons.
They do.
They protect the prison that they put themselves in, they hold the key to, and they will throw things at you to stop you opening the door. Because as long as the door's closed, even though they have the key, they can tell themselves somebody else put them in that prison.
Yeah, it's easy to stay in that space of blame and justifying why they're there. And there's also the consistency piece, because we have the consistency where, hey, I'm here, and you know what, this is what it is.
It's familiar.
And when you start disrupting,
I'm safe. I know how to do this.
That's it.
It's safe.
But
it's safe. It's been great having you here, Damion. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, find out about your books, and about all your services and all the resources that you have.
Best place to reach me is DamionLupo.com, IONDAMION, Lupo.com. You can find me, you can reach out to me, and all the books and the work that we do is there.
Fabulous. We will make sure that we post that link, of course, in our show notes, and I'll just give it to you again. It's www.DamionLupo.com. DamionLupo.com. All right, check it out. I highly recommend that you do so. And also, Damion has a YouTube channel that's full of resources, some great videos on there. Get yourself over there, have a look at them, and reach out to Damion. Let him know what you got out of this show today. It's been great having you here, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared.
Dov, thanks for a really, really engaging time and the opportunity to share all this stuff with you and everyone that's listening.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir. Hope you'll stay with us till the end while we just say goodbye to everybody else. I want you, dear listener, dear viewer, to make sure you use what you learned today. And remember that research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, in that these fast-growing companies find themselves at a point where they are spending an absolute fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have them leaving them at just extraordinarily fast rate. If you're sick of training and developing your talent before you get a chance to have that ROI that you need, reach out to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by helping you to tap into your deep soul purpose as a company and as an individual. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to keep you and your organization at the top. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to also stop by the Matrix and get your self-assessment tool, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, the Authentic Leadership Matrix tool. Get it for yourself. It's free to you as a regular listener to us, valued at $197. It's absolutely free. Matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. This is Dov Baron, and I'm here to connect you with your deep greatness. So stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the true potential of who you are, the true potential of who others is, and where you're trading potential for the truth. Take a look at what Damion has expressed with you today. Where is the real gold? Go there. Dig deep. Till next time, this is Dov Baron. I'm out.